See a man named Mr. Lee standing in front of a big mansion and holding a pocket watch in his hand. Inside the mansion, people stood and watched 98-year-old Mr. Wrong on his deathbed as the doctors came and informed everyone that Mr. Wrong might not be able to make it. Suddenly, Mr. Lee opened the door and proudly walked towards the men, saying Mr. Wrong's remaining lifespan was exactly 2 minutes and 9 seconds. The men turned around, wondering who he was and how he managed to come in. Some of them drew their guns, so Mr. Lee took out his pocket watch and they froze as if he'd stopped the time. Everyone got shocked and wondered what kind of superpower it was, but Mr. Lee reassured them he just paused the men temporarily. Lee then appeared in front of Mr. Wrong's bed in an instant and asked to allow him to introduce himself. He claimed to be a businessman selling a product that Mr. Wrong desperately wanted: time. 10 days ago, Lee received a message from his mother who suggested they quit to work because it was too stressful and buy a house in the city. Lee thought that the ordinary people were too small for the city of Damon capital, which was the international financial metropolis, but for the sake of his dream he stayed. Lee thought the life in Damon City was cruel and didn't want to live a life in a place where nobody appreciates your efforts. Out of nowhere, a man runs into him, panicking and screaming he was late. Lee looks at the man in anger and suddenly sees info about the man's name, age, and the remaining lifetime. His remaining lifetime was 3 seconds, and in exactly 3 seconds, that man got hit by a car and died. The people called the police, but Lee couldn't move, realizing he was able to predict the man's death. Wondering if he'd gone crazy, Lee noticed the pocket watch in his hand, having no idea how it got there. He clicked it and suddenly it stopped raining and everyone around him stopped moving. Lee realized he paused the time and really became able to see people's remaining lifespans. And then he understood. He knew the acquired ability was amazing and now wanted to use the opportunity to change destiny. Besides time control, he had an ability to manipulate people's lifespan by taking time from some and giving to others. He then clicked his watch and the time continued, and he started wondering how time was everything in life, and without time there was no life. Lee decided to become a time merchant who would trade time and control the life of anyone, especially the elites, and this was the moment the villain was born. During a cold and rainy night, Lee sat in his apartment writing something on a piece of paper. A moment later, his roommate Yang came in, all wet, complaining about the weather and saying she had to go and change the clothes. They exchanged eye contact and Yan thought Lee became handsome somehow. Then she shook it off, thinking to herself that he was just a poor adopted son and not a person she'd like to marry. She went to her room but couldn't get Lee's appearance and confidence out of her mind. Lee knew she was a special woman but wouldn't want to have anything with him and decided to use his skill to sell time to the wealthy. He made some kind of a contract he'd provide to the buyer as a form of protection from the law and criminals. Lee gave himself a nickname, calling himself a time merchant, and decided to buy time from people and sell it for a high price to people in need. A day later, Lee sat on a bench in the park and observed people in the street, thinking about getting a first customer. He looked at some grandpas and children and realized it would be a bit sad to work with them because life really is the most important treasure in people's lives. His thoughts were interrupted by a man in a costume talking on his phone. He called his girlfriend and promised he'd buy her an iPhone since he was already doing several jobs. Then his boss appeared, yelling he should work harder. Lee looked at the man and saw that he was 21 years old and he would live for 65 more years. A smile appeared on Lee's face as he knew the man would be his first customer. The guy in the costume received a small amount of money for his work and happily walked away. Lee followed and approached him in a restaurant. He sat in front of him and took out the pocket watch, stopping the time and people to demonstrate his ability. The man was shocked, so he backed up, but Lee stood up and politely introduced himself as a time merchant. He calls Lee a lunatic, but Lee calls him by his name, Zhang, and explains he'd been wandering the world for many years, buying and reselling lifespan to people in need. Zhang asks how he knew his last name, so Lee shows his info, explaining he'd have a very long life and asking if he'd like to sell some of his lifetime. At first, Zhang felt suspicious, but then asks for the price. Lee shows him a suitcase containing 3,000 yuan, or about $46,000, and says he'd get it for a year of his lifetime. Zhang thinks for a few seconds, and Lee tells him to sign a paper if he'd like to make the exchange. Zhang thinks about all of the gifts he could buy to his girlfriend and how doing a part-time or any kind of job is just spending time to make money. Just imagine how big of a simp this Zhang guy is, because he's literally selling his life away so his girlfriend can get a better smartphone. Lee interrupts his thoughts and asks if he made a decision, and Zhang, thinking it's just 1 year of his life, determinedly says yes, he'd like to sell it. Lee hands him the contract, and as Zhang nervously signs it, the life force leaves his body, meaning the transaction was successful. Lee snaps his fingers so the people in the restaurant continue with whatever they were doing. He pays and gives Zhang his contact information in case he wanted to sell some of his lifetime again, but Zhang declines, saying he'd already lost a year of his life and it disturbed him enough already. Lee didn't care about his pitiful reasoning and put the card on the table, telling Zhang he'll need it. Lee took a walk in the city streets, thinking about the successful first transaction he made and observing people around him. He decided to take a rest in a restaurant and check for potential customers online. The main news on the internet talked about Rong family's second-generation family head being ill, having very little time left, and its new generation being unable to succeed him. Lee knew that the Rong family passed down for hundreds of years and was a famous family for paying huge taxes, making the country rich. The news put a smile on his face, and Lee knew he found himself a new client. That night, Mr. Rong lied on his deathbed, concerned about his royal family. As Lee offered to sell and prolong his lifetime, Rong's eyes widened because he knew how much his life meant for the family. People surrounding them wondered if Lee was a liar, but he reminded them that Rong's lifespan was less than 10 minutes. One of the men asked how much the time he offered cost, and Lee said the cost would be equal to 1/5 of total annual earnings of the Rong family, so the final number would be $15.6 million. One of the men yelled he was lying, but Lee took out his pocket watch and showed that Rong's remaining lifespan was just 5 minutes. Lee looked at Rong, waiting for a reply, and his nephew begged Rong to hurry up and decide. Rong lifted his hand up and gasped, "Live, live." The nephew said he wanted to buy a 1-year lifespan, so Lee quickly pulled out a document, asking Mr. Rong to sign it. Rong was too weak to move, but the will for life gave him enough energy to sign the document at the last second. Suddenly, he felt a strong sensation and a glowing light blinded everyone in the room for a brief moment. Rong felt better, and his remaining lifespan as of that moment was 365 days. Everyone got shocked because of his incredible recovery, and Lee clapped and stood proudly, saying that the deal was done. Rong's nephews approached and asked how he was feeling, and clenching his fist, he said he felt full of vitality. Lee mocked them, congratulating and saying thanks to himself, and then wished Mr. Rong to have a lot of joy in the next year of the life he bought. His nephews tried stopping Lee to talk about the money they promised, but he stopped the time and dipped, leaving a piece of paper with his account number. The agents that aimed their guns at Lee unfroze and got very surprised, seeing old man Rong completely recovered. Rong jumped out of his bed and ordered everyone to keep quiet about what had happened. The nephews showed him the contract Mr. Lee left, and Rong said to follow the agreement and pay the guy. He stood next to the window, thinking about the incredible power Mr. Lee possessed, and then ordered his nephews to be friends with him. Lee spent the rest of the night on top of one of the buildings, thinking about how his time control and time trade abilities are good, certain he's made the right decision becoming a time merchant. He knew he would gradually become unable to help everyone as the number of customers increases, so he thought of a plan, a longevity club. The club would be gathering ordinary people, elites, and wealthy businessmen who would be divided in 6 levels measured by the money they spent in the club. Level 1 members would be the ones who spend millions, level 2 hundreds of millions, and so on. Also, level 1 members would be able to redeem up to 1 year of life, level 2 to up to 3 years, and so on. The plan was to make the Longevity Club the most terrifying and mysterious organization and become the most influential and known person in the world. To form a successful club, Lee needed to find the most reliable people and loyal staff. So he concluded that most of these people would be the ones who are forced to work hard in life. He took a walk in the streets and a taxi driver stopped, asking if he needed a ride. Lee saw his age and thought he looked way older than he actually was, and probably was one of the people who were tired of making money and making ends meet. He sat in the taxi and driver politely asked if he was a businessman, judging from the style unlike himself. Lee looked at his phone and saw $15 million received from Mr. Wrong, and just as he was about to answer the question, the driver's phone rang. The taxi driver panicked while talking on the phone and said he'd go to the hospital right away and asked Lee to exit the vehicle because there was an urgency. Lee told him to keep driving since he'd go to the hospital too. The driver thanked him and started talking about his high school student son who needed tens of thousands of dollars to enroll in the elite university. He said it was a pity not being able to afford the money and a shame for the child and now himself too. The story touched Lee, so he stopped the time, left some money on the back seat and exited the vehicle. The driver arrived at the hospital, and as he turned back to thank Lee, he realized there was nobody at the back seat but just some money. He stepped outside the car and started calling for Lee to return the money, but Lee was nowhere to be seen. There was also a note written by Lee that said that money was just a tip, and if he wanted to earn some more money, he could look at the codes on the back. He became emotional and bowed, thanking Lee for his kindness. Lee watched him behind a corner, thinking there was no need to thank him for such a thing. A moment later, he saw an injured blond man in the distance. The blond man asked what he was looking at and then just passed by, accidentally dropping his medical report paper on the ground. An hour later, Lee came back to his apartment and saw Yang napping on the living room couch. He wasn't so happy she fell asleep in the living room again, but still decided to cover her with a blanket to make her more comfortable. Just as he was about to put the blanket on her, she woke up and asked what he was doing. He tried to explain himself, but Yang interrupted him and said she'd just go to her room. She slammed the bedroom door and he threw the blanket on the couch, knowing her reaction was normal because they were just roommates. Lee then sat at his working desk and started working on his longevity club idea. A couple of hours later, he decided to take a break, knowing the club would be formed in no time. He woke up the next morning and Yang asked him why he wasn't getting ready for work. Lee said he took a day off, but Yang thought he was lazy and probably wanted to quit working and go to his hometown. He then closed the apartment door, sat in the chair and said that in fact, he didn't have to go to work anymore. Later that day, Lee went to a real estate consulting agency to check on some business. As the consultant talked about the houses, Yang approached, surprised to see Lee in the office. Lee said he knew she worked there, so he decided to come and see if he could find a suitable house. Yang couldn't believe her ears and thought somebody just commissioned him, so she asked Lee what his total budget was. Before he even answered, she told her working colleagues she knew Lee and she'd talk to him. Yang sat down and nervously talked about the available houses, mentioning a $70,000 house. Lee smiled the whole time and said the house was obviously old and small, but Yang told him to stop joking because the houses she offered met his criteria best and there was no way he could buy a villa considering his income. Lee confidently sat in the chair and said the villa wasn't looking that bad, so Yang didn't know what to make of it and sent her friend back to deal with Lee. As her friend sat with Lee and talked about the house contract, he thought Yang looked even more attractive when angry. Mr. Lee interrupted the consultant and said he'll buy the house, but the lady told him to stop joking since the unit was 406 square meters big and cost $7 million. He replied saying he wants to buy the house from her, so she ran past Yang, calling her boss, saying she sold the most expensive house. Yang was suspicious and decided to wait until he signed the contract. The boss arrived and asked for a $500K deposit, but Lee proudly said that he doesn't do deposits but pays directly. Everyone in the agency started talking about Lee, and Yang couldn't believe that all this time she looked for a rich man and he was right in front of her nose the whole time. Gold digger vibes maybe? Lee left the office and received a call from the taxi driver. Lee said the offer was still on the table and the driver said it was time they meet again. They met at the bus station the next day and Lee suggested they find another place to talk. The driver said his father was ill and had to undergo a surgery. He managed to survive, but staying at the ICU is quite expensive. He took some loans and now his relatives are trying to avoid him and they are asking him to give up. The man started crying and said he needed money desperately and would do anything to get it. Lee took a sip of a coffee and said he could give him a lot of money in exchange for his lifespan. The taxi driver asked if he was talking about some illegal activities, but Lee demonstrated his powers of time control and explained that the things he offers are completely legal. The man asked what he was talking about, so Lee explained he's a time merchant, a person who buys and sells people's time. Then he asked if he'd like to trade his time for money, and the man asked about the price. Lee said he'd pay him 3 times more than he earns in a year for 1 year of his life. The driver immediately asked if it was possible to sell 3 years of his life in exchange for $1,350,000, and Lee said he'd only have 10 years left. The man said that the remaining lifespan would be just enough to fulfill his responsibilities as a father, so Lee instructed him to sign the contract if his decision was final. He signed the contract and Lee transferred the money immediately, so the driver took a walk to the hospital to pay his father's bills. Lee thought the man's burden should be lessened now, but still wondered if he'd regret the decision when the time comes. A moment later, the blonde drunkard from the last time threw a bottle next to Lee, saying it was his and he better pay him back. Lee chuckled, so the man attacked him. Lee told the guy that based on the medical report he dropped the last time, he'd live for about a month and pass away. The drunk man got a bit scared and Lee started walking away, telling him to follow him if he wants to live. The man followed him and Lee asked questions about his illness and his family. The man said his name was Peng and he had leukemia. Lee said he should be home resting and his family must be worried for him, but Peng said he left the house and told him to pretend he already died. Wow, not depressive at all. Peng's answer positively surprised Lee, so he decided to test the guy and speed up the time by 100 times. Their surroundings changed and Peng asked what was going on. Lee told him not to worry since he comes in peace, with an offer to prolong his lifespan in exchange for his loyalty and freedom. Knowing the surroundings he saw weren't an optical illusion, Peng asked what was going to happen next. Lee said nothing at first and just admired Peng's way of speaking and being straightforward. Peng waited for the answer and started thinking about his siblings and parents and how he, not wanting to become a burden to them, left the home to earn some money for his family before he died. Unfortunately, he wasn't accepted by people because of his illness, and now he knew that selling himself wouldn't be a bad thing after all. Lee interrupted his thoughts, asking if he made up his mind. Peng knew he'd die either way, so he kneeled as if he accepted the offer. Lee understood the gesture and gave him 100 days of extra time and perfect health. Peng felt the energy flow through his body and Lee asked him how it felt to be healthy again. Peng realized Lee was for real and said he'll be his slave from now on, doing whatever Lee orders him to do. Lee handed him a piece of paper and told him to clean himself up and dye his hair black and come to the address written on the piece of paper. Lee looked down at him and ordered to call him master and then disappeared. After taking the first steps in creating the longevity club, Lee knew he needed more loyal subordinates to help him ensure the growth. Whether they'd be scientists, security guards, or IT specialists, it didn't matter as long as they were helpful. A moment later, the apartment doors opened and Yang appeared with a bottle of wine in her hand, looking wasted. She entered the apartment and Lee immediately realized she prepared for that moment after finding out about his wealth. Yang came closer and complained to Lee about hiding his identity. She put a finger on his lips and Lee calmly asked what she was going to do about it. Still close to his face, touching his ear with her lips, Yang said she wants him to take 3 shots as punishment. Now we see Mrs. Yang flirting with our protagonist, pulling all of the tricks out of her experience in hopes to attract him, but to no success, as Lee has grown as a person since he got his powers that he can resist her temptations and control the situation, so he took her to her room and threw her in her bed. This makes her sober up a bit. She starts apologizing for what she has done, and Lee just tells her that he actually likes the cunning women like her, but that he's not the same person from the past and that she'll have to put some effort to charm him. How the turns have tabled yet again, bros. This takes her by surprise as she's the one that got charmed now. Next day, our protagonist was working on something and Miss Yang just runs out of her room saying that she'll be late for work and that she had too much drink last night, but Lee just tells her that he took care of that and that he helped her take a leave from work for today and that she should just rest properly. She's grateful for this and wants to thank him somehow, and he suggests that she should cook something for him to test her cooking skills. She obediently accepts it and he thinks to himself how money has such a powerful influence over people. At that moment, Peng Hao shows up at the door dressed like a proper soldier, ready to take any orders. Miss Yang is curious about why this person is calling Lee master, and Lee tells him that he doesn't have to call him master anymore, sir should be fine. Lee introduces the contract of cooperation he made for them and goes over the points of it, where one of the points is that Hao can list 3 things our protagonist can't make him do. Peng Hao, without even reading the rest of the contract, quickly signs it and tosses it right before Lee. Our protagonist, happy with Hao's trusting spirits, pronounces their cooperation official and now they are a team. Lee gives him his first task. He needs to find a university student called Zheng Bo Wen and hand him a piece of paper. Hao takes the paper and reassuringly tells our protagonist to treat it as it's done. This makes Lee think of how great it is to have an assistant. It definitely makes things much easier. And if he wants to make the longevity club, he won't be able to do it alone. Now he starts thinking of other requirements for his club. He'll need to make a database of his customers, and he should also start preparing a venue for the club. Using his experience as a programmer, he'll just need to find some people to help him working on the app, and he's pretty confident he can do all of this. Now while the employees at Windsor Green, which is the strongest firewall system, were going over the security measures of the system, it gets infiltrated by someone. It turns out that night before N City was under attack from a computer virus attack never seen before in history. The government computer system for the stock exchange collapsed. According to the reports, financial losses of the country exceeded tens of billions. The report also says that the largest of the cyber attack was the computer laboratory of the University of the N-City. The hacker broke through Windsor Green, a supreme computer, and took the confidential data of the laboratory. The reports claim that if this data is lost, the damage to the future of the artificial intelligence would be too great. And psychologists claim for the available data of the hacker they gathered through his videos that he sent when he would hack the system, that the person that hacked the system is someone who doesn't have much time to live. also that his personality is that of someone that enjoys performing and that he wants to create an event that will shake the world. Watching this, our protagonist realizes the potential opportunity, and then he calls Peng Ho to ask him to visit the Wrong family. He wants to borrow some experts from them. In the next scene, we see a man in front of a bunch of computers violently coughing. We learn that he is the one behind the infiltration of Windsor Green's system and that he is suffering from the deadly tumor and he doesn't have much time left. His intention is to cause the internet to collapse as he dies. Just as he was working on his plan, his firewall gets breached and the hacker gets a message telling him that he won't die if he finds Mr. Lin. Hacker thinks this is just a bait and he won't fall for it, but he gets another message telling him that he can be saved and that he should just give it a try. He gets an invite to a video call, which he accepts after giving it some thought. Right at that moment, a video shows up with Lee on it, casually sitting, greeting the hacker by his real name. The hacker gets shocked and wonders how Lee knows his name, but our protagonist tells him that he knows a lot more about him. And then with a snap of a finger, he creates a projection of the hacker's information right in front of him. Lee tells him that he's got only 10 days left to live. The hacker is confused because he doesn't understand how they found out his location and other details, and he also rejects that he's only got 10 days left to live. Lee gets all serious now and tells him that he's the only one that can give him what he wants, which is more time. Our protagonist tells him that he should use his computer skills to find him and that 10 days should be plenty enough for him to do that. The hacker is upset by all of this, and right about when he was about to ask Lee who he was, the video call ends, leaving the hacker utterly puzzled about what happened and if all of this is just a trap. Now we see Lee talking to a computer expert that helped him reach Robert, the hacker. Expert tells him that Robert is highly skilled and that it might cause them some issues, but Lee tells him that he shouldn't worry and that at the end of the day, the hacker too is human and all humans are the same. They all fear death. At the city airport, we see Robert looking dreadful, coughing violently, and it seems that he decided to try to find our protagonist. He asks the airport staff that was concerned with his excessive coughing where he can find the location that he has on his phone. Back at the Lee's mansion, Hao Peng complains that he's feeling weaker already, even though he just used a couple of days of his lifespan. This makes our protagonist realize the limits of his power. It seems that the 100 days of exceeded lifespan only reverted Hao's body to the state he was in 100 days ago, and that it doesn't prevent the disease from developing further. He can control time, but not everything that comes with it. Lee thinks that his medical knowledge isn't enough for him to solve problems like these, but if he can see it from a different perspective, like if he saw Hao not as a human but as a bunch of cells grouped together, that would make his power work. Excited about this idea that just came to his mind, he orders Hao to bring him a very precise microscope and a sample of his blood. And our protagonist tells him that he's got a hypothesis that he wants to try out, and if it works, there'll be a big surprise for Hao. After getting his microscope, we learn that our time merchant is researching his ability to slow down the time. He thinks that if he could apply this power to every single individual cell, he might be able to prolong a person's lifespan. And as he's looking through the microscope, he starts seeing the lifespan of each individual cell. Now he thinks that if he can use his ability to slow down time on the sick cells, and if he can slow the spread, then he could slow down the time it would take for the blood cells to split, and in that way lower the dangers of the disease. And not just that, but he can also increase the possibility of the disease losing the body's immune system. So his understanding of the basics of how leukemia affects the body helps him understand the way he can help Peng Hao. Next we see the young robber finally arriving at Lee's mansion, still skeptical about this whole thing. Right when he was about to knock on the doors, he gets slammed by them and Hao runs out, putting him into a choke thinking he was just a thief sneaking around trying to steal something. Robert tells him to let him go and that if he doesn't, he'll put up his nudes onto the dark web. This catches Lee's attention and he realizes it's the hacker. Our protagonist is really impressed with his skills as he found them in no time. Lee also thinks that his Chinese is also pretty good, and Robert tells him that China is a pretty dominant force in the world of technology and that it would be strange if he didn't know at least a little bit of Chinese. Robert then goes on to pretentiously ask Lee if he is the Thai merchant because he doesn't look like anything special. This gets Hao annoyed, so he smacks him and two of them have a little bit of a fight. Our protagonist stops them and invites Hao to approach him. He then proceeds to try out his hypothesis, and as long as he can focus on the things he wants to manipulate, even if they are tiny cells, he can control their time. As he found the leukemia cells in Hao's body, he slows them down by 10 times, basically curing Hao. Our protagonist tells Hao what he did and that now the rest is up to his immune system. Hao, all happy, says that he feels completely different from before and that now all aching stopped and he feels like he's full of energy. Our protagonist then turns towards Robert with a confident smile and asks him what he thought about him now. Robert is utterly shocked and can't believe what he just saw. In the next scene, we see Robert jumping around with happiness, saying how something like this could exist, and his body doesn't hurt at all. He got treated by our protagonist, and Robert grabs Lee's legs and praises him to the extent to call him a god. Hao is annoyed by this behavior and tells him to treat Lee with more respect and not talk so casually with him. Our protagonist, however, offers an invite to Robert to his longevity club. Robert agrees to join the club with an utter excitement and he says that he'll follow him for the rest of his life. Lee then hands him the contract and tells him what he'll need his help for. First, he'll need to create a database for all the talents in the world and that he should focus on those with weak bodies or those with weak parents with chronic illnesses or those who are on the verge of death. After that, he tells him that he should create another database for the rich. They should be sorted by age, wealth, health, and other variables like those. And finally, he'll need him to do something right then. He needs him to create a software for messaging that ensures absolute secrecy and privacy. Robert, with an utmost confidence, just tells him that it's a piece of cake and that he'll take care of it. Now, at the residence of the Wrong family, Mr. Wrong assures one of his guys that Lee's powers are real and that he is the proof of it. At that moment, one of the security guards comes over with a package telling Mr. Wrong that a guy of about 20 years of age sent it over and that it's for him from Mr. Lee. Wrong wanted to be opened right away after learning that it's from Lee. When they opened it, they found a phone in it and on the phone displays saying Longevity Club. The other guy says that the same guy also gave him a piece of paper a while ago. Wrong gets angry for not being told this before and he orders him to read the letter right away. In the letter, it says that it's an invitation to the Longevity Club and that the Longevity Club uses a ranking system for its members, and then it explains the requirements of members at each level. Basically, the more of the points a member has, the higher he's ranked. Then the letter says that when upgrading to the next level, only half of the points can be bought. The other half has to be obtained through completing missions assigned by the Longevity Club. As for the perks of being a member, the letter explains that each level will be able to, relative to their rank, exchange for a certain amount of time. So basically, the Longevity Club lets its members exchange for lifespan. The guy that was reading the letter says that if he didn't witness Mr. Lee's powers in person, he wouldn't believe that such a club existed. Wrong tells him to gather everyone and that they'll have an emergency meeting right away. At the meeting, Mr. Wrong tells the attendees that he received an invitation from Mr. Lin about the longevity club, and other members of the Wrong family get anxious about it. They all witnessed his powers and they can't take him lightly. They should take this as a serious matter. Mr. Wrong, who is the senior in this family and the one with the most say, tells them that he already made up his mind about it and that he doesn't want to delay their response to Mr. Lee if he wants to make a good impression on him. Other family members express their worries about him and that at the end of the day, he's the only one invited to the club anyway, so it's his decision. So Senior Wrong clicks the option for accepting the membership and is immediately entered a chat room with other members casually chatting. The members of the Wrong family are all taken aback when seeing that the club already has that many members, where some of them appear to be a couple of 100 years old. And then we see that it's actually all fake and that these characters are created by Robert with Lee's instructions. Robert seems to enjoy this job where he's basically role-playing. They use different fake characters to make Mr. Wrong think this is all real. They discuss one of the members' age as a way to convince Wrong of how old and established this organization is. Then they use one of the characters to give Wrong the so-called newcomer's mission. The character by the name of Tu tells Wrong that he should change his name to 129 since he's 129th to join, and that the chairman will send him his first newcomer's mission. It also says that the completion of this mission will give him a lot of points and that he'll be officially accepted as a member of the longevity club and he'll start his journey of chasing life. If he's ready, he can start right away. We see Mr. Wrong overwhelmed by all of this as he stares at what he just read. The members of Wrong family now learn that the longevity club is a club that was established by Mr. Lee for those seeking for longevity, and that this club had appeared many times throughout history. And each time it appeared, it was under a different name. For this era, they are called the Longevity Club, and it has 3 missions that also guide the direction in which the club develops. The first mission is to protect the Earth, because according to the club information, the Earth will be the only place for humans to live, so they can't neglect it. The second mission is to advance the technology, especially the technologies regarding the space exploration, which will allow the club members to break the shackles of Earth in search of an even better world. And the third mission is to advance biology and human evolution, and at that moment, Mr. Wrong stops reading all of a sudden, realizing that some of these members are really old, and it could be that the smaller the number they carry in their name, that older they actually are. And even though their family is a pretty old one, existing for at least a couple of hundreds of years, some of the members in this club are alive since the Ming Dynasty. Mr. Wrong starts feeling overwhelming emotion of reverence as he realized this. The experience and the wealth accumulated by these individuals over the years must have already reached an incredibly frightening amount, so he can't allow himself to insult any of them. While he was thinking about all of this, a message comes from the president of the club describing the first mission. It basically says that the Longevity Club needs a meeting place that satisfies certain requirements and that Mr. Wrong should provide it for them, and he can get 500 points for completing this mission. The members of the family, upon reading the mission details, took it to be rather easy, but Wrong solemnly reminded them that they are going to be observed by a very powerful individual, and they should do this mission impeccably and find a place that matches the requirements perfectly. On the other end, Lee and Robert get a response from the Wrong family that they'll do their best to finish the mission as quickly as possible. Robert tells Lee that they took the bait, which is exactly what they wanted. Our Thai merchant tells him that they shouldn't relax too much about it and they shouldn't let their guard down and allow the Wrong family to find their location out. Robert assures him that it won't happen as he's really good at what he's doing. Our protagonist finds it really exciting to be able to personally create a huge organization. Few days later, they receive a package from Wrong family with all the different locations options for their meeting. It seems that there was a lot of work put into finding these locations. After our protagonist skims through some of these options, he finds out one that looks like it suits his tastes. It's a place that's located behind the most prestigious universities in China and has an academic atmosphere. It also combines both traditional and Western styles. Robert confirms that the location meets all of these requirements and they settle for the choice. At the appointed time of the meeting, we see Mr. Wrong in front of the location with his staff, waiting for Lee's arrival. Our protagonist shows up and apologizes for being late. Bros, this guy can literally control time and he's running late. It's same if I was like the best manhwa recap channel, but I only recap anime. Now back to the story. Wrong praises Lee for giving his life more time, but our protagonist just tells him that there's no need to be polite about it. He traded money for that extra time, so it's just business. After that interaction, the members from the Wrong family take our protagonist for a tour of the place. The place looks really amazing. After Lee and his guys have a discussion about the place and how they can use it, the Wrong family staff tells them that if they have any other option in case they're not satisfied with this one. Now we see the senior Wrong getting a text on his phone telling him that he passed the mission and got 100 bonus points for completing it as well as he did. Wrong is thrilled about this as well as the other members of the family after learning about the great news. Meanwhile, our protagonist thinks that it's time for the next transaction. Now at the venue they were provided, we see our protagonist going over his available human resources and their pros and cons. First, we've got Peng Hao, which is assigned the code name of 001. He's serious, calm and able to act when needed. And he has no major personality flaws when it comes to his usefulness. He also possesses strong growth potential, and Lee wants him to work in the security department where he'd be responsible for the safety of the longevity club. And so, Lee thinks that he should keep training his body to produce the best results with him. The next they have Robert Tappan Morris with an assigned code name of 002, and he usually only focuses on things he's interested in. He's got some personality flaws, like a strong desire to always perform. Our protagonist wants him to work in the online security department and to maintain the longevity club group chat. Lee thinks that for his growth, he just needs to give him some time and space. And lastly, our protagonist gives his own self-analysis, thinking that for his improvement, he needs to give himself a bit of time and train his own abilities through reading, thinking, experimenting, but he also thinks he needs to sketch out the plan on how he can expand the longevity club. Here we learn that our protagonist might be more ambitious than he showed himself to be so far. He explains his own philosophy of how he wants to approach his business and his role in the world. For him, time in the future should be endlessly flowing, neither rushed nor slow. He wants to use the perspective of someone trying to develop a view into the whole of human history and trying to imagine how the future plays out in the grand scheme of things. But as he gets really deep in his thoughts, he realizes that just maybe that's still too ambitious for now and he's just a human being, and that he should think about what he can do now, which is to work hard with his employees. In the meantime, at the Wrong family residence, they manage to get a new mission as the missions keep rolling out, and whoever first accepts it gets the mission. Wrong Senior tells them to immediately start working on it and use all of their resources to successfully complete this mission. Wrong takes this very seriously. The mission states that they should find a retired soldier and that they can get anywhere between 10 and 50 points for it. Then we see Robert telling Hao about how the Wrong family just accepted the new mission and they started bickering. our protagonist stops it by telling Robert that his Chinese sounds a bit too formal and that he should work on understanding Chinese culture better so that he can use Chinese more naturally. Lee tells him that he'll soon need him to help him complete the data on customers from all around the world and that he'll have to become fast and accurate at translation, which means that it's very important that he masters all kinds of languages, so he still has got a lot of work to do. Robert, however, in his usual confident tone, tells our protagonist that with his intelligence, that won't be a problem. Lee also prepared a special room for Peng where he can train. This room's time runs faster by 100 times, and he also has an instructor for him to teach him all the things related with protection and security, like how to handle weapons, how to guard a place, different fighting techniques, and so on. Some really cool stuff. Now Lee questions Hao's resolve, but Hao just tells him that he'll do it. The next day, the retired soldier came by the name of Zhang Qiao, and he shows up at the door and tells our protagonist that he can't talk about his past work-related experiences, but from now on, he only listens to our protagonist's orders. Just from his initial presentation, Lee concludes that he's a very efficient and professional person. Lee introduces Hao to him and explains his duties and that he can go as hard on him as he wants. Then, dealing with that, our protagonist thinks how the advanced computers on the market don't meet Robert's needs and that they need a supercomputer to maximize his potentials, which can cost a lot of money, which won't be simple, but that is an investment that he needs to make. The computer will be very important to the longevity club. Meanwhile, we see Hao training really hard with the instructor. The instructor is testing his abilities and resolve to the highest levels possible. Even Hao realizes that this is nothing like street fights. This will definitely push him to his limits. The instructor keeps trying to demotivate Hao by telling him that he's not ready and that he should give up, but Hao is having none of it and just keeps asking for more, which the instructor likes. As they were going at it, our protagonist, silently observing them, uses his abilities to speed up the time in the room by 100 times. Then he gets a phone call and it ends up being that university student he met recently, Zhang Bo Wen. Later on, we see our protagonist and Hao's discussion on the information on the student that Lee had Hao investigate. Hao says that the student is pretty popular in his school and that he spends quite a bit of money on girls. He's known for giving girls high-end gifts and he's even made a name for himself for doing that. Everyone thinks he's the son of a millionaire with the way he spends his money. Lee understands that that's the money he gave him and that he's probably calling to get some more to maintain the image he earned. Our protagonist decides to meet up with him at a cafe where the student was nervously expecting him. Lee tells him that he noticed the way he spent money, but he neither praises him nor reprimands him. Lee also tells him that he knows exactly why he wanted to meet up with him. The student then tells him that he actually wants to sell him more of his life years. Our Thai merchant stoically explains that after the first transaction, there won't be any limit to how much time he can sell and that he can decide himself on how much time he wants to sell. It's all up to him. The student also gets reminded that for every year he sells, he gets older by that amount and that he should think this over very carefully as he's still just a young university student and there's still a lot of possibilities for his future. But the student with a blank expression just says that his girlfriend said she wouldn't stay with him if he didn't own a nice car for them to go on nice trips with. Yo, can you get a bigger simp than this? I'm genuinely asking. You're selling your life away, literal life, so your girl can sit in an expensive car when you take her out on it. What? Bro. Anyways, he says he wants to stay with her so that he can show her the world. Then all of a sudden, with his face going from reverse to full seriousness, he passionately tells our protagonist that because he's got 64 more years to live, he wants to round it off and sell 4 years of his time. Then, as if consumed by greed, his resolve goes up even more and he increases the years he'll sell to 5. He also tells our protagonist that after this business deal, he won't go looking for him again. Lee tells him that he won't interfere with customers' wishes and that if that's what he really wants, then he's got himself a deal. After all, he's just a businessman. The student doubles down on it and they sign a contract with student given 5 years of his life in exchange for a lot of money. Departing from each other, the student says that he won't see our protagonist later because this is gonna be the last time they see each other, but our protagonist knows better than that. He'll be expecting his call. Now, with some time to sell, our Thai merchant calls up Robert to ask him about any potential customers he can sell some time to. Robert tells him about some giant in entertainment industry, Song Shik-seong, that is about to kick the bucket. He's from the so-called 4 great families of Mo City, so he might be a great customer. Our protagonist seems happy with this prospect. The Song family is one of the greatest families from the Mo City. They have a rich history and they are very well known and are influential. They've been around for more than 100 years already, and as for now, they mainly focus on the entertainment industry and they are important players in the entertainment industry. Under the leadership of the Song family head, the Song family has accumulated extreme wealth over the course of 100 years. The international Tengren movie company, which is owned by the Song family, is ranked first within the entertainment companies in the country. There's also some first-rated actors working under the company. Also, Mr. Song Ziwen's marriage that's happening soon is the biggest news recently in the entertainment industry. High-ranking members of society and big names in the entertainment industry will be attending this wedding personally, so this is like a huge event for all celebrities. Song Tuen is the grandson and a direct heir to the CEO of the international Tengren movie company, Song Shik-seong. Lee's thoughts get interrupted by Miss Yang, now literally treating our protagonist with grapes. She seems to be tamed as Lee wanted her to be. She makes a comment on the Song family's wedding ceremony that was being announced on the TV, and she gets all excited as she seems to like big extravagant weddings. While she was talking about it, Lee's thought wandered off and he started thinking how most of his money he got from Wrong family is already used up and how Song family will be a great next target. Robert was doing a close research on the Song family and he found out that the eldest Song is about to die and his family wants to use the wedding as an opportunity for the ritual that they call the rinse of luck. Basically a Chinese superstition where marriage is used to rinse away all the bad luck. So learning that even such a famous family believes in superstitions makes him curious. Miss Yang, thinking out loud, says that she wonders what kind of wedding this'll be and how awesome it would be for her to go see it. Lee, hearing this, tells her that he can take her there himself. He's realizing what gold digger she is, but then he also thinks she doesn't have any other major personality flaws, and he can of course go there investigate Song Shik-seong's real conditions. On the day of the marriage of Song, Lee and Miss Yang arrive seeing all of the glamour this wedding has, with many famous actors and celebrities, mostly noticed by Miss Yang. Upon seeing how high class this wedding seems to be, she becomes a bit skeptical if they can actually get in, but our protagonist just reassures her that they won't just get in but enter through the VIP way. Right at that moment, a limo stops right in front of them and one of the people from Wrong family comes out inviting our protagonist in. He says that he'd picked him up at his place if he was informed about it sooner, and Lee just tells him that he had some errands along the way anyway, so it's fine. The man introduces his daughter that he brought probably as an escort to Lee, not knowing that our protagonist already had an escort. The woman is the man's daughter, Rong Wenwei. Miss Wenwei approaches Lee, telling him how she's heard a lot about him and that it's actually an honor to meet him. But then she realizes Miss Yang next to Lee and immediately changes her expression. Our protagonist pulls Miss Yang closer by and introduces Miss Yang, saying that she's his girlfriend. The man from the Wrong family introduces himself to Miss Yang and tells his daughter that he'll be accompanying them and that she should go to the other car behind. As our character sees Miss Yang slightly distressed, he tells her that she's with him and she has nothing to worry about and nobody's going to look down on her. At this point, she just thinks how calm and confident he is, even after being with such a high-ranking members of society. She wonders who he is, cause he's not the same guy from before. When the members of the Song family notice the Wrong family cars, they welcome them and express their gratitude for attending Ziwen's wedding. These two families seem to have a really good relationship. However, upon seeing our protagonist, especially while he's treated with all of this special respect, even by one of the Wrong sons, the Song family members start getting curious about who this might be. The Wrong guy introduces our protagonist as the VIP guest of the Wrong family. They still seem confused about who he is, as they've never heard of him before, but they still welcome him, with Utsue's father personally extending his hand and thanking him for coming. The Song's guy, seeing that Wrong family is treating him with respect, thinks that there has to be a good reason for it and he should just follow along. Our protagonist gets introduced with the younger Song and tells him that he looks exactly like his grandfather when he was young. And so the young Mr. Song thinks that Lee knew his granddad, but our protagonist just tells him that he did his research before coming to the wedding. Then they keep the conversation going, while in the back it dawns to Mr. Wrong why Mr. Lee wanted to come to the wedding. It was because of the head of the Song family. A bit later, we see our protagonist and his escort Miss Yang walking the red carpet, and she is mesmerized by the experience, as she never thought that she'd be able to do this, and sees how the upper class people live. She gets nervous being watched by so many people that she trips and almost falls, but our protagonist grabs her and prevents her from falling, and then confidently tells her that she should calm down. This attitude of his just makes her think this wasn't his first time to be in such a place. His demeanor is so cool, calm and collected. Our protagonist, hearing her talk about this, thinks that since awakening his powers, walking on the red carpet seems like nothing. He then tells Mr. Wrong that he wants the photos with him in it to be deleted, to what Mr. Wrong just says yes without asking any questions. The wedding starts with well-dressed hosts opening it up and then introducing the bride. Miss Yang gets even more excited seeing all of this, and our protagonist just thinks that this is beyond extravagance. Making this happen requires a long history and a large name to your family, and this just makes him realize how much he has to gain from this customer. Then we see the grandfather Song, the eldest of the Song family, being invited to give his blessing to the marriage. But as he starts with his speech, a violent cough keeps interrupting him. And right then our time merchant gets up from the chair and uses his power to stop the time. Everything freezes in the moment, as our protagonist keeps slowly approaching the old Song and his grandson. Panic gets to them and they start calling for the security guards, but to no success, cause time stops for everyone but the two of them. Lee then tells the old Song how much time is left, and the Songs are confused, not knowing what's happening. The old Song even thinks that our protagonist is the Grim Reaper, but Lee responds that he's just a simple time merchant and that he can save his life. He then proceeds in a dramatic tone to say the lines he usually repeats, that he only trades time and that even though people say that time is priceless, he'll sell it. As younger Song thought this is some kind of a scam, he jumps in front of the old Song and tells our protagonist that it's all nonsense. But the old Song, being very curious and probably also from desperation, grabs the younger Song by his shoulder and pulls him back, and then asks Lee about the price of the time he's selling. Our protagonist then explains how things work. There's a different value for everyone in the same amount of time. and he defines the value as monetary value, where the price of a year is calculated by taking 1/5 of the money a person earns in a year. And he also adds that the time they can buy is limited to a year for each transaction. He then hands them the contract information and tells them that they can get in touch with him when they are ready, but he also reminds the old song that he should probably be quick about it because he doesn't have much more time left. And as they were perusing the card he gave them, and just when they were about to say something to him, our protagonist was already gone. The old song turned towards his son and told him how he suddenly remembered how the head of the wrong family got really sick and was in a life danger, and the young son added that the old wrong suddenly got healthy. And they also think of how the wrong family treats this unknown guest with so much respect. There has to be something about him. So the old song suggests that they should have a meeting with the wrong family. Meanwhile, we see Miss Yang having time of her life, meeting all of these celebrities and taking selfies with them. Just as she was concocting a plan to use these photos to make her friends jealous, she sees Zhao Menzi, one of the most beautiful women in the country, and she thinks how she needs her signature. As she was heading towards her, she trips and spills a drink all over Miss Menzi, and this makes Miss Menzi extremely annoyed. Now we see Miss Yang completely shocked by what just happened, thinking that she messed up big time. Trying to save the little face she had left, she got up in a desperate attempt to apologize to Miss Menzi, but Miss Menzi now furiously slapped her, rejecting her or her apology. All of the onlookers were looking down on Miss Yang, describing her as a commoner and as a peasant. Then a guy standing next to Miss Menzi tells her that she's already a mess and that the girl already apologized, so she should just let it go. But Miss Menzi had different plans, as she took the glass from the guy and spilled it on Miss Yang in retribution, saying that if all the problems would be solved with apologies, what would be the police then for? That's some great argument if you want to justify yourself being a douchebag to people. Great argument. Then Miss Menzi is getting enraged even more, thinking how this random woman just embarrassed her and made her lose important opportunities. She slaps Miss Yang one more time, with Miss Yang falling to the side. Miss Yang couldn't believe how rotten this high society is that she admired before and wanted to be a part of. Then Miss Menzi takes her by the chin and tells her in a quiet voice that she had no choice but to do it. If she didn't do it, others would say that she's weak and could be bullied easily. And as she was being told this, a loud commanding voice came from the back of the room saying to let Miss Yang go. And now we see our protagonist pacing through the crowd, repeating that Miss Yang needs to be let go. Just when Miss Menzi got up in protest to leave, Old Song appears and says that he is with him. Then Miss Menzi, seeing this, starts explaining the situation in a frantic tone, but her explanation gets interrupted by old Mr. Son bowing down to our protagonist and apologizing, and then he sends a piercing look on Miss Menzi, letting her know that she is in a real big trouble. And as she's making all these calculations in her mind of who Lee is and why Mr. Song respects him so much, the old Song in an angry voice tells her to apologize immediately to Mr. Lee. She understands that her career is going down the drain if she doesn't do it, plus that she's not sure who our protagonist is and what he's capable of, so she bows down and deeply apologizes to them. The old song tells her that her apology is not enough, which makes her keep increasing the intensity of her apology, but he too keeps telling her that she needs to apologize more and that it's not enough. So she realizes what she needs to do and starts slapping herself and desperately apologizing. The young song tells the senior song that he should stop, but the old song tells him that this is up to Mr. Lee and no one else to decide. He'll say when it's enough. Then, as Miss Menzi was on the floor from all the beating she took from herself, Our protagonist tells her to stop slapping herself and approaches her, stoops down and tells her that she really does look much better on screen. The woman is left speechless by his attitude, and then he says that he doesn't want to spoil the mood any further. After all, it's a big day for the Song family, and then he just takes Miss Yang and walks out of the venue. We see Senior Song trying to draw Lee's attention, but to no success, and then he tells his son that they immediately need a meeting with the Wrong family. Before leaving, the younger Song tells Miss Manzi that these were the consequences of her actions that they won't be able to handle, and that she better not think of revenge, cause then even the Song family wouldn't be able to save her. But we see her angry and desperate, thinking how she doesn't care about the consequences. Now we see our protagonist and Miss Yang in a taxi on their way back home. She's apologizing, but Lee just tells her that she shouldn't envy those celebrities cause all of their value is just based on their looks, but they had to sacrifice their dignity and boundaries for it, and he also tells her that life might seem tempting, but they are basically just treated as items and nothing more. They are being controlled by influential people that bend and play with the law, so even the money they earn isn't clean. It's all a charade. He also tells her that not only should she not envy them, but that there's no need to be afraid of them. After them arriving home, they see their neighbor, Mrs. Zhu, struggling with some boxes that seem too heavy for her to carry. We also learn from the rumors Miss Yang heard that Miss Zhu comes from a renowned family of scholars, but that she was set up for an arranged marriage with a guy that had some kind of a rare disease, which she found out after they got married, and he doesn't have a long time to live. Our protagonist was just thinking how Miss Yang likes gossiping, and then he told her to go in the house while he helps out the neighbor. Lee then went over and introduced himself to Miss Zhu. She said she knew that they had new neighbors, but she's just a bit surprised that they are this young. She then asked him about his job, but he skillfully avoided the topic by changing to a topic and asking her why she's carrying such heavy boxes. Miss Zhu tells him that her husband is sick and they don't have a maid, so she has to do all by herself, but that's what she's used to. Then our protagonist sees her age and lifespan using his powers. He thinks to himself that it's a pity because she's gonna be a widow for a long time. After Lee helping her, she thanks him and invites him for a tea, but hearing coughs from the inside, our protagonist decides not to and tells her that he'll give them a visit the next time. Then as he's walking away from the neighbor's place, he receives a call which he expected, and it's from the Song family. They want to meet up and have a conversation, and our protagonist agrees. We now see Lee, as he's leaving his house, gets greeted by Miss Zhu. She asks him if he was going to his work because he's dressed so formally. He tells her that he has a meeting and also adds a comment complimenting her looks as he takes off on his bike. Miss Zhu starts finding our protagonist interesting. At the residence of the Longevity Club, we see Senior Song arriving. His son tells him that they shouldn't take this lightly and maybe they should send someone in first, but the old song says that they need to trust Wrong family and just go with it. Son agrees. At that moment, Hao walks out of the mansion and invites them in, saying that Lee was already waiting for them. Hao also tells them that they can't take their bodyguard with them, to which they first show reluctance. Hao tells them that these are the rules and that either they'll follow them or otherwise they can leave. The Senior Song agrees with the rules and tells him to take him to our protagonist. As the Songs get in, Junior Song notices the prestige of the place and how the value might be comparable to a small city, and he starts questioning if Lee owns this. Hao, hearing this, tells him that they shouldn't doubt capabilities of his boss and that Lee offers something that is beyond money. Then they walk in a big room where our Thai merchant is awaiting for them. Lee sees that the old Song got just 4 more hours of life, and so he gets straight to the point. He asks them if they are ready to pay the price that they can start right away. They agree, and our protagonist reminds them of the price, which is supposed to be 1/5 of their yearly wealth. Lee starts using his power, and Song just overwhelmed with the experience. The old Song thinks how Lee is walking on the river of time and has a complete control over it. He seems like he's looking down onto this world. Then he tells younger Song to hand our protagonist the money. The young Song would think this is a joke, considering the astronomical price of this, if he wasn't told by the wrongs otherwise. Lee presents him with the time contract and tells him to sign it, and then when he signs it, nobody would be able to stop the trade. The old Song, without hesitation, says that he understands and signs it right there. Then the old Song starts feeling that some changes are happening in his body, some sensation is slowly building up in his chest, and there's a huge shock that goes straight through his heart. And as he's not able to keep himself on his feet, the junior Song catches him before he falls down. Junior Song, then all worried, starts asking our protagonist of what is going on, but Lee, with his hands in his pocket, just confidently smiles. Then we see that the old man Song stops twitching from pain, and he comes to his senses feeling better than ever. He says that he doesn't feel any pain in his chest anymore, and that it's a miracle. The junior Song then looks at Lee in awe, thinking of what kind of powers these are. Our protagonist tells them that the transaction is completed and that they should leave. Then they get a call by Hao telling them to follow him. He'll escort them out. They first look at Lee and then at each other, thinking that this is some crazy experience. As they are escorted out, they thank Hao for showing them the way. After getting in the car, the young Song wants to confirm from the senior Song if it actually worked and if he's feeling better or any different. The old man tells him that it definitely works and that the health he feels can only come with time. He also says that he couldn't believe this to be possible. Through his life in this world, he never thought it possible that people could manipulate time, something that was thought of as untouchable by humans. Then he tells Junior Song to transfer the money, the exact amount, immediately. Now back at the Longevities Club's mansion, our protagonist is relieved that another transaction went well and that the money they earned will help them relax a bit. Lee then asks how his training is going, to what Hao apologizes, saying that he still can defeat the instructor. But our protagonist is happy, knowing that he's been training really hard. Even though he's been training for 10 days, with the sped up time, that actually amounts to years of training. And he thinks that the change is definitely visible on him. Hao is now a different man, much stronger than before. Our protagonist laughs and then puts a hand on Hao's shoulder and tells him that he can see all of his progress that he made and he's really happy with it. He even calls him a brother, which makes Hao emotional. Then two of them go to check up on Robert to see what progress he's making. They actually catch him curled up watching some TV show. Hao tells him that he's a slacker and Lee doesn't mind much but wants to see the progress with the database. Robert says that the 70% of the database of all the rich people in the world is completed and that he also upgraded the program he asked him to make. He says that he had to infiltrate more than half the internet on Earth just to get those information. His understanding of Chinese culture and Chinese language is also better now. He then shows him the program, but our protagonist notices the ridiculous cartoonish design of the interface of the program, and just when he starts questioning it, Robert goes on to excitedly explain how he also improved the security of the members' phone and that nobody would be able to infiltrate it, which distracts Lee from that weird design he made. Then he puts our protagonist in the chair and asks him to try out the new search engine he made that filters different results according to his special needs. Lee gives it a try and is fascinated with the sophistication it took to make this. It's very accurate and fast. He's also happy with the interface design and tells him that that's the kind of design that can represent a culture, and Robert in protest just tells him that his is more relatable. Our time merchant, as testing out the search engine, comes across a woman that he thinks can do a business with next. She's a designer with a brain tumor. Now in the next scene, we see a woman in the hospital, singing a depressing song as she's sewing, looking like she doesn't have much of her life left. We learn that this is not the first time she sang these types of sad songs from the people in the same hospital room, and that she's suffering from the terminal cancer. At the moment when they were having a discussion about her situation, our protagonist shows up and stops the time. He shows up in front of the sick woman and introduces himself to her and invites her to the longevity club. The woman is at first surprised, but then sinks into her depressing attitude, telling him that even if they could extend her life, she doesn't see the point in it. She says that through the disease, she saw all of the goods and bads of the world and she has no wish to continue. She just wants to finish her last work before she passes away. She says if he can help her do that much, he would be of great help. Our protagonist thinks to himself how her reaction to seeing her lifespan is completely different from other people and how she's weird, but then he was right about how he thought she'd treat her work. He tells her that since she isn't shaken by her own imminent death, that he'll try doing something just to see if her perspective on life might change. Lee then starts using his powers, trying to locate tumor cells and decreasing their speed by 15 times. And he says it's just a little gift for her and that she should accept it. Now we see her breathing heavily but looking really healthy with even hair fully grown. She can't believe it and starts crying, saying that she really hopes this isn't just some dream. Our protagonist just smiles and tells her she's welcome. Lee tells her that she's a talented designer and that only with having her healthy hair she regains the soul in her works. She confirms this by saying that her work changed once she learned about her terminal disease, which made her change, and so her work changed too. She also says she wished that her disease worsened faster so that others would just remember the beautiful her instead of ghost she became after getting the disease. She then falls in prostration to our protagonist, thanking him profusely for what he did to her. Lee now knew she was ready and asks her again if she would join his longevity club, to what she passionately agrees. Sometime later, we see Miss Stan, fully recovered from tumor, already working on something at the Longevity Club mansion. She's now in charge of the club's image and design. The image of the Longevity Club in the eyes of the public is a great responsibility. We now see Miss Stan presenting a new design of the interface to our protagonist. Lee thinks she was very fast and that she's adapting quickly. Upon checking it, Lee seems to be really happy with how it looks. Robert is not as excited, knowing that his superbly relatable design was rejected. Our protagonist then sends Hao to take the phone to the Song family, just as they did with the Wrong family. Now they have two official members, and our protagonist wonders what kind of relationship they'll have. It probably might be of a competition for points, and thinking about it makes him more interested in it. Just then he gets a notification that 130th member joined the group chat, and then there's a conversation in the chat about why the president, or Lee, is adding new members in the club in such a short time. And we see many fake accounts coming up with different explanations just to make it more convincing to the only real members in the group. One of them says that maybe the president wants to re-enter the world after so many years. Another one says it's to give hope of life to more people, to what they laugh. reading all his fake conversations, our protagonist thinks what a smart guy Robert is for coming up with these things. As he was looking at the phone in self-satisfaction, he gets a call, and it's a call from one of his work colleagues from the life before he got the power. He asks him if he offended someone important, because there were some people asking about him. They even got to some confidential personal information which they could only get if they had good connections. His colleague tells him that he's calling him now as a favor because he knows Lee used to help him as well, so to warn him because these people looking for him look really dangerous. Lee's colleague then asks him if he does any illegal business, and our protagonist just says that he did some business but that it was all legal and that he doesn't have to worry about it. Lee then thanks his former colleague for letting him know about this, and they end the call. Our protagonist then has an internal dialogue thinking of who might these people looking for him be. So far he's only been working with the tycoon families, and they signed a contract, so they are bound by them. The Song and Rong families wouldn't dare doing anything like this, so it has to be someone else. And then he remembers, it has to be that outdated celebrity, and he also realizes that he overlooked how easy digging up information about him is. Lee then goes to Robert and tells him about it, and he wants him to find someone for him. Robert finds this to be a great opportunity to test their new Sky Eye system. Now in the next scene, we see Miss Manzi with some suspicious looking guy. She tells him about how the songs told her not to look for revenge even with people behind her. We then see them checking the documents with the background information of our protagonist and Miss Yang. And with an air of arrogance, Miss Manzi says everyone knows under whose protection she is, so how could this happen? She's so stressed for being looked down on. Then this suspicious guy says that this involves the Song family and they need to take it with caution and get more information about the relationship between the Songs and our protagonist. Miss Manzi, getting confidence from all this talk, says that she'll make our protagonist pay. There's no way for her not to take revenge on him. She'll definitely make sure he pays for what he did to her. While they're having this meeting, we see a camera recording everything. And now we learn that it's our protagonist and his team that are spying on them, monitoring them through that camera. Lee is annoyed about it and thinks to himself why Miss Manzi just couldn't let it go. This'll just complicate things further for her. At that moment, Robert tells Lee that he found some information on the big guy Miss Manzi is dealing with, and it turns out that he's a big fish. He's actually the second oldest in his family. His name is Zhou Han Yang, and he's the owner of the North Metro Industries Group, that which is a real estate development and strategic investment company. Han Yang's real estate business is spread all over the world, and he's a super tycoon with numerous properties. Robert goes on saying that he also has many lovers, where many actresses are rumored to be involved with him, including Zhao Manzi. He's her financial backer. Robert finds that this guy is also not a good person. He's known as a notorious debt dodger in the real estate circles. It's not uncommon for the businesses to fail because they failed to collect their debts from him. Also, his son, Zhou Peng, ran away after a hit and run, and while driving under the influence, he even fought police. He was a real troublemaker. It's also their business, North Metro Industries Group, that demolished a private property during its development while people were still inside it, burying an old couple alive. And there are also information on accusation of Han Yang threatening female student that if she didn't accompany him, she would be killed. Robert then says that there's much more, and that all of this information is hidden and cannot be found on ordinary internet. It's an information that is inaccessible to the general public. Our protagonist then tells him to stop searching more on him, that he heard enough and that it's clear that they're not dealing with a good guy, but with a greedy and cold-hearted person. Then Lee tells Robert to keep monitoring them, and in case he hears anything which he should know about, to let him know right away. Lee thinks so this Han Yang guy is a bit tricky, cause even with all the wrongdoings he committed, the law didn't catch up to him. This has to be a very powerful person so. Now we see Hao training with the instructor. He thinks that if only he could take the coach down, he'd get his approval, so he swiftly leaps at him and then does a sudden turn to confuse the instructor. The instructor is thinking how much Hao improved, but it's still not enough as he seemingly dodges his attack, not seeing that it was just a diversion. And Hao manages to throw the instructor into air. Just when Hao thought he won, the instructor still manages to land on his feet. Nonetheless, the coach compliments his efforts and advises him to never let his opponent get up after he already put him down. Seeing this fight, our protagonist just claps in praise of Hao's astonishing improvement. He then goes on to say that the instructor Zhang really trained him well. He also apologizes for interrupting their training session and asks if he can borrow Hao for a bit as he wants to discuss a certain matter with him. Then outside, Coach compliments his progress once again, but Hao, as if disappointed with himself, tells him that he still couldn't defeat the instructor and he's still not strong enough for him. Our protagonist then tells Hao that he's got a task for him. He, attentively turning towards him, asks what could he do for him, and Lee coldly tells him that he needs him to kill somebody. Hao is left paralyzed upon hearing this, thinking if he will really need to kill someone. As Hao is pondering over what he just heard, our protagonist notices the distress on his face and tells him that he shouldn't worry cause this time he will be with him. He then tells Hao to meet him at the library in 7 hours and prepare himself well for it before they meet up. Hao excuses himself and leaves while our protagonist thinks to himself that this time Hao doesn't seem as calm as he thought he was. Lee thinks that in case of Hao seeing blood, which he is bound to see, he might experience psychological barrier, and if he can't overcome it, then Hao's value will significantly drop down and all of Lee's hard work will amount to nothing. It will all be wasted. We see our protagonist concerned, hoping that Hao doesn't let him down. Then as Hao comes back to his training quarters, the instructor greets him by having a rock thrown at him, but then he notices a different energy with Hao. It's almost as if there's murderous intent behind it. Something is strange about him. Now we see Hao taking a shower and trying to convince himself of what he has to do. He's been trying so hard for this moment, so he needs to do as he's expected, so he can't fail now. It's his mission to be a weapon in his master's hands and to kill whenever he points. Then he goes to the bed and pulls out a knife from under the bed, saying that that should be enough for this mission. We still see him in conflict over this, but greatly reduced. It seems that all that self-convincing actually worked. At the library, our Thai merchant is waiting for Hao as he comes in. Lee asks him if he's ready to what Hao responds positively, but seems like he's full of determination and he got rid of all the doubts and insecurities he had earlier. He looks like he made up his mind about this. Lee comments on Hao's condition and Hao just says in a badass way that he feels good as hell. Now our guys are at the cafe going over the details of the mission, and this is Hao's first mission of this kind. Lee will speed up his time by 100 times so that even the surveillance that they might have won't be able to catch him. He then also tells him about the bodyguards that protect Hang Yang, but that he should especially be careful around 2 of them. There are 2 bodyguards that are always close to him and they've been following him since he was just a gangster on the streets. Hao confirms that he understands his mission and that he won't leave anyone alive. Lee explains that the Hang Yang's mansion is pretty nearby from the cafe they are at and that he'll be waiting for him there after he's finished with his job. Hao is confident about it and says that he can consider it already done. Our protagonist then proceeds to use his power to speed up the time. As the sped up time settles in, Hao just runs off into the direction of the mansion, while our protagonist goes out to the coffee shop, looking at the night sky and says in a dramatic tone that the moon looks nice and that it's a shame Han Yang won't be able to see it again. At Han Yang's mansion, we see 2 guards talking when something just goes past by them. They do notice something, but they haven't a clue about what it might be, so they just disregard it, saying that if it's something, then the dogs that they have at the back can deal with it. Their sense of smell is much better. They say that those dogs are really bloodthirsty and aggressive, in fact, so aggressive that they actually ate a kid who used to mess with Hang-Yang's girl. At that moment we see a dog, as if it's noticing something. The dog gets up and starts looking around when Hao, out of nowhere, with a speed of light, slams the dog to the ground and drives his knife through his skull. The blood splatters all over the dog's house. The dog didn't even have the slightest chance. Bros, I know these dogs used to kill people, so they're like bloodthirsty, murderous dogs and they deserve to die, but I just don't feel good about watching dogs die. What's up with this, man? Couldn't they just place a robot or something? Anyway, Hao thinks to himself that this time speed increase is too magical and it makes things so much easier. Inside the mansion, two men that seem to be Hang-Yang's bodyguards are talking about just random things when Hao shows up, looking all menacing and distorted from the sped up time effect. And then he says that he found the first target. Upon seeing Hao in this form, one of the bodyguards starts calling the other guy and shouting that he's seeing a ghost. But even before he could react, he gets sliced while the other guy falls back upon seeing this, not knowing what's happening. Hao, after finishing the first guy, quickly leaps towards the second guy and slits his throat, telling him to be silent and that it'll all be over soon. Now Hao goes off to look for the last target, Hang-Yang himself, and he finds him in one of the rooms, sleeping in a bed with a woman besides him. Hao quietly opens the door and enters the room where Hang-Yang is now sleeping, and now Hao is standing over him, giving him a stare of death. He looks like a lunatic with how much resolve he has to complete this mission and make his boss happy with it. Now we see Hao, still at the mansion, going over some documents that he found in Hang-Yang's room, with Hang-Yang dead at the back. He's completed the mission and assassinated his target, but regrets for giving him such a quick death, and then tells him that he'll do a better job when they see each other next time in hell. In those documents he found a bunch of photos of girls he exploited. He then puts those photos in a bag and leaves the place. Back at the cafe, while our protagonist is patiently waiting for Hao to return, he shows up putting the bag with the documents and saying that he completed the mission successfully and that he retrieved all the documents and information he was ordered to find, and he even found a lot of blackmail material he had on other people. Lee then compliments him for finishing the mission and asks him how he feels after seeing blood. Hao says that he's fine, but our protagonist still sees some uncertainty in his demeanor and thinks to himself that he needs more time to get used to these things. He then, hoping that he can change his perspective to help him a bit, tells him that he doesn't need to carry so many mental burdens for these types of people. He tells him that those people do terrible things which are completely out of reach of the law and that it's natural for them to receive such an outcome. Then, to conclude his point, he tells Hao the death of those people isn't necessarily a bad thing. He also adds that Hao should stop thinking about it and take a good rest for a couple of days, and that he'll give him a well-deserved reward for completing the mission so successfully. As our protagonist is leaving, it dawns on Hao that he might understand the point Lee was making, because you see, for those people Hang-Yang toyed with, his death might not be a bad thing at all. The next day at the Longevity Club mansion, in the training room, Hao shows up challenging the instructor to a fight. The instructor wonders why he didn't take a longer rest for himself and makes a joke that he just came from another beatdown. Hao tells him that if his bones break, he can grow them back quickly, but if he gets rusty, he will lose all of his skills. The instructor is really happy with what Hao said and then tells him that he won't go easy on him. They start the fight and Hao, now looking fiercer than ever, manages to land a kick on the instructor, sending him to the ground for the first time ever. The coach, after being blown back like this, starts thinking of how Hao suddenly got this strong. How. Looking at him, he sees pure determination in his eyes, and that's something that he lacked before. Even his kicks became much stronger, and he seems to have finally managed to overcome his mental barriers. After the fight finished, we see the instructor and Hao outside. The instructor, admitting defeat, tells him that he now owes him a dinner as they agreed. Hao laughs at that. Rubbing his injured part, the instructor says that he's never seen anyone improve that quickly and wonders if he improved because of our protagonist. Looking to avoid unnecessary questions, Hao just tells him that he just trained more and that that's all there is to it. Then the instructor gives him a serious glance, noticing a change on Hao, and asks him how it felt to do it for the first time. Feeling shock going through his body when asked this question, Hao responds that some things are better left unanswered. But then, noticing the tensed up situation, feigning naivete tells him that he meant on how it feels defeating him for the first time, and then tells him that he's becoming too cocky and is ready to have at it for the second time. Hao agrees, and the instructor, annoyed with the extra confidence he has, tells him that he'll take the win right back where it belongs. Then the next day we see a woman looking for Hanyang. She's got some business to do with him and needs him to sign something. As she goes through the mansion, she notices that there aren't any bodyguards, which is weird for this place that is protected 24/7. She keeps looking for him until she comes across the dead bodies of the bodyguards that make her fall on her back screaming in fear. Next, we see the mansion becoming an investigating area for the police. They conclude that they all were killed in one strike and in the same way, which means that the assassin was very professional and how he knew what he was doing. And oddly enough, one of the inspectors notes that after doing a detailed investigation that all 4 people, including the dog, have died almost at the same time. The other inspector gets really shocked by this information. One of them says that they are at least a couple of meters away from each other and that even if the perpetrator ran in a straight line, it'll still take him more than a minute. He thinks that it might not be by one guy, but by a team of professional assassins. He then asks for the surveillance cameras and if any of them captured anything that they can use. The inspector then learns that the Zhou family already took the footage and thinks to himself that it's something the police shouldn't interfere in any longer. Back at our protagonist's place, Robert also reveals this information to Lee, but Lee says that he doesn't mind Zhao family taking the footage as they already have a lot of enemies on the business market and now they have some powerful allies themselves now. Then at the Wrong Mansion, we see a meeting taking place about the incident that happened with our protagonist and Miss Yang. They are all aware that Miss Zanny is already taking steps to not leave it at what happened at the wedding. They know who she's connected with and that she insisted on Hanyang investigating our protagonist. This behavior annoys them as it goes against their interest. Mr. Lee for them presents a great new opportunity at life itself and his powers must stay hidden for their own sake. They themselves already knew his present identity, which they think is just an identity he gave himself for this period, but that is irrelevant. They realize what they need to do and the old man Wrong gets up and says that they need to help our Thai merchant cover up this incident with Hanyang dying and also keep his identity hidden no matter what. And we see a very serious, dark-looking character from the Wrong family taking up this order personally. Overhearing all of this, our protagonist exclaims in a victorious tone that that's exactly what he was expecting. Even if he didn't do anything about the information leaks, his allies would cover up for him because it's for their own interest. And all they need to do now is sit back, relax, and reap the benefits of it. After all, they did their part and now it's on their allies to complete the work they started. At the place of Hanyang's brother, they discuss about their own investigation, and one of his men says that they had investigated the footage from the mansion, but they just found a bizarre set of events happening which they can't really explain. They suggest he watch the footage himself to understand what they are saying. On the video footage from the surveillance, they first see simply dying without seeing any perpetrator. He just gets thrown in the air and then slammed back to the floor, already dead without any logical explanation. The man then says that this is how all the rest of them died too, without catching any glimpse of any murderer. But then the man continues that if they slow down the footage by 10 times, they see someone standing or something there, and because they are at the limit when it comes to slowing down, this intruder's speed must be of unthinkable proportions. So he makes a conclusion that the assassin of Hangyan is a being that exists in a different space and time. Hearing this, Hangyang's brother, Junior Zhao, gets completely petrified, thinking of what kind of person did his brother mess with. The woman, probably a former personal assistant of late Hangyang, might have some useful information on this. She goes on to say that this all started with Hangyang's lover, and this gets Junior Zhao really curious, so he orders her to tell him everything that she knows about this and not to leave anything out. After learning about the events, Junior Zhao is shocked that the head of the Song family, even when he was sick, got out there to help some average young man. The Hangyang's former assistant tells him further that he even said that she shouldn't think about any revenge because she wouldn't be able to deal with the consequences. Junior Zhao is confused by this whole situation and really wants to know why would old man Rong respect some unknown guy this much, and he also gets furious at thinking that some woman used his brother for her own selfish needs. And bros, just imagine his perspective. He sees like some unknown regular guy who has the backup from like the most powerful families in the world, and then his brother mysteriously dies from some like supernatural force. He's probably thinking this is some kind of a ghost. Definitely a ghost. Anyway, back to the story. He can't get rid of this feeling that the focus should be on that young man that the senior Rong protected. And why would he do that? The assistant adds that before the incident took place at the wedding, they had no idea of who this guy was. It's almost as if he came out of nowhere. The other guy says that he found something interesting and potentially useful. The Rong and Song families have been active in recent times to the degree that even some of the inactive members started moving about, apparently working on something mysterious. This gets Mr. Zhao curious about the head of the Rong family and how old he is. The man tells him that he is a 98 years old man and that it was rumored that he was on his deathbed and was about to die from an illness when all of a sudden he got well and active. Looking at the recent pictures of the senior Song and senior Rong, he concludes that that's not how dying people look like. They seem all too lively. It's as if they suddenly became healthy. Mr. Zhao, connecting the dots, thinks of the old men that refuse to die and the someone they protect with everything they've got. So he thinks if this is really someone he can go against. As the overwhelming feeling of this case being beyond his pay grade reaches him, he commands others to stop working on this case and just leave it there. The assistant woman, taken by surprise, starts protesting this, forgetting her place, saying that they shouldn't leave the investigation here. Mr. Zhao, with a menacing expression on his face, turns towards her and others present for the meeting and tells them that every word that was spoken in this room stays in this room, or else they would all be treated with no mercy, and that's his final decision. Mr. Zhao is thinking that it's just not worth messing with someone being backed by two huge families until he finds a way he can deal with them first. For now, they can only pretend that nothing happened, and we can only pray that the Rong and Song family won't investigate any further and mess with Hangyang's people in the capital. Now we learned that Robert was eavesdropping on everything and heard everything that was said in this meeting. While munching on his snacks, he says that Lee was right this whole time. In the presence of an unknown power, even the most powerful people will be afraid to make wrong moves. He thinks that working for our protagonist is really interesting. While enjoying the situation, Robert gets a notification that his system detected a level 10 talent, which is a person that meets very specific requirements, especially when it comes to their usefulness. Robert can't believe what he's seen because he's familiar with this person. He says that it's the guy from the textbooks. Robert immediately lets Lee know about this. Our protagonist also recognizes him. It's Tang Xiaorui. We learned that Mr. Tang gave up a chance for better living conditions outside the country and came back to their country, and then he contributed an immense amount in the field of biology. With his contributions in biology, immunology, virology, and immunology again, it could be said that half of the students in the country area are his disciples. Our Thai merchant thinks that there's no one quite like him. He then tells Robert and Howe to prepare the information on him because he'll be paying a visit to Mr. Tang personally. This opportunity can't be missed. At the hospital where Mr. Tang is hospitalized, our protagonist asks a nurse about the exact location of Mr. Tang, pretending to be his student, not because it was his plan, but she brought it up conveniently. She points to him where it is and where what she believes to be his other classmates are. Meanwhile, a woman is telling the students that for some reason they won't be able to see Mr. Tang and that their visit has to be rescheduled for some other day. Students don't seem to be bothered by it and even tell the lady that they are there in case she needs type of help regarding Mr. Tang. Just when the students were leaving and saying their goodbyes to the lady, our protagonist gets caught sneaking into the Mr. Tang's room by this lady. She asks Lee if he's there to visit Mr. Tang as well, but thinking to herself, when did he got there all of a sudden? We now learn that she's Mr. Tang's granddaughter, and she tells our protagonist that the doctor said that Mr. Tang is not feeling well today and won't be able to take any visitors. Lee, pretending understanding, tells her that in that case he won't be going in, but then as he's right in front of the room with the doors opened, he just gives a glance at Mr. Tang and turns his power on that provide him with the information on Tang's lifespan and other related information. And we see this guy is really old. He's 102 years old, and we see a different side to our protagonist now, something that we didn't see before. Lee thinks that someone as great as Tang should not just die here, and that it doesn't matter if it's for his personal gain or for the world, he wants him to survive anyway. But he's also curious about what Tang thinks about this. A little later, we see Tang waking up with his granddaughter sleeping next to him by his bedside. He then says that his time has come and that the most difficult thing for him to let go is her, Fang, his granddaughter. He then puts his hand on her head as he tears up and says that it's her and his students that are his greatest pride, and that he still wants to see her grow and start a family, but that he's just out of time and this is a big shame. Then as he said that, he hears a voice from the side calling his name. He turns and sees our protagonist that then tells him that he can wait to tell these things after Miss Tang wakes up because he still has a lot of time left. Old Man Tang, in a state of shock, asks our protagonist about who he is. We now see that Mr. Lee already is using his power to slow the time down for them, and then he explains Tang who he is and what he does. Tang can't believe that such a thing exists in the world, such a thing as a time vendor. Our protagonist then tells him about the Longevity Club and about its 3 goals like protecting the earth, advancing the technology, and achieving human evolution, and he then reveals how he found him through his global database for searching people and how he's come here to invite him in his last life's moments to join his Longevity Club. The old Tang agrees to join under one condition, which is to never have to betray his people and his country, and he says that he'd rather die than do any of those. Our Thai merchant is happy with these conditions and tells him that he agrees with him and that he promises to never make him do any of those. Tang's room gets full of light as we see our protagonist use his power. We learn that one of our protagonist's motives and perspectives in life is where the saying that good people never seem to live long enough, but yet the bad people never seem to die, is not something he wants to believe. He chooses not to believe in things like those, so he's using his power to prove the point that that is not the case. Tang is a good person and he will live because he wants him to stay alive. Now we see Tang breathing heavily while saying that he feels like someone injected energy into his body. Our protagonist tells him that he reverted his body state to when he was 99, and he also tells him that if he were to walk in this world as a healthy old man, that would probably raise some suspicion, which is why he just gave him a year of life for now. Quickly picking up what Lee was indirectly suggesting, Tang tells him that he understands and that he'll organize his funeral and he'll make a new identity so that he can join Lee's longevity club. Our protagonist is pleased hearing this and says that he expected nothing less from him as he's a very intelligent person. Just before our protagonist was to leave, Tang stops him to remind him of the promise he made to him regarding his conditions. Lee tells him that he is Chinese too and that he shouldn't worry about it. The next morning, Tang's granddaughter, Fang Fang, wakes up seeing her grandpa up and well. She is shocked by this and runs to embrace him. She's so pleased that he recovered and she says that they were so worried about him. But then Tang, changing the mood in the room, tells her that he just wanted to see the morning sun one last time and that he has no time left. She's left confused by this as he seems to be much better. Then a thought comes to her mind that it could be a kind of a terminal lucidity, which is basically when a person is about to die, there's an unexpected return of mental clarity and memory suddenly regained that occurs in the time shortly before death. But she still can't believe that that is what's actually happening. In the next scene, we see that there's Tang's family gathered around him as if to say their final goodbyes. Then the old man Tang tells them that after he dies, he wants a small portion of his inheritance money to go to them and the rest they should donate to the professional research facilities. He says then that kids like Feng Feng are their hope for the future and that they shouldn't judge their ability by their age. As he was saying this, Feng Feng was sobbing the whole time. She seems to really love her granddad. As Senior Tang said this, his son fell on his knees and tells him that he's still not at that stage and that his project will be able to save him, but the old man Tang responds with a very harsh tone, saying that his project is still incomplete and that he shouldn't dare to do something that goes against his morals. He says that he wouldn't forgive him even after his death. His son, when hearing these words, gets really sad and starts sobbing too, saying that he'll miss him. Tang just puts his hand on his son's head and apologizes for not spending more time with them instead of dedicating his whole life to the country. Tang then tells them that they are the best thing he left for their country and that he's proud of them. But now he has to take a rest because his time is up. He then tells his son Boyan that he needs to have a word with him alone. After Boyan was left alone with the old man Tang, Tang tells him of what he needs from him. It's that he wants to settle his discharge procedure as soon as possible and to find Boyan's uncle and to make him a death certificate. Tang's son is really flabbergasted by this request as he's not sure why would he be asked for these things. But before he could form any proper thought and questions of his own, Tang continues that after that is done, that he should send him to his old house in his hometown because there'll be someone to pick him up there. And after all that, he tells his son if anybody asks about him, he should just tell them that the old man Tang is cremated. Boyan is visibly even more confused about this than before. He tells him that he doesn't understand, but Tang tells him that there are many things an average person like him won't ever be able to understand, let alone being able to explain to them in the few sentences of what's going on. Tang then tells that he should keep all of this a secret and never reveal it to anyone. Then his son gets all serious, understanding the burden he just received, and reassures him that he'll do what he's asked to do. Our protagonist is standing right in front of the hospital, just pondering over the fact that Tang's descendants will be watched by their grandpa that is not in heaven nor in hell, but right here, somewhere here on the earth. At that moment, he receives a call, and it's from some lady that had Lee recommended to her. She needs his services. Our protagonist tells her that his services are not free, and she says that she's aware of it and is willing to pay any price for her son. Later on, we see our protagonist waiting at the cafe, waiting for this lady that called him earlier. She arrives with a taxi, and as she steps into the cafe, Lee notices her immediately. It's Chen Yupin, an older lady dressed in a working janitor clothes, which does draw attention from the cafe's staff and their guests, as this cafe is of some prestige, and let's just say that people dressed like her with her appearance are not the usual customers at this place. Anyway, after recognizing her, our protagonist calls her over and politely asks her if she'd like to have something, to what she refuses, saying that the place is rather expensive, but Lee orders her something anyway, showing that class. Then as they sit down and as she starts talking about her circumstances and needs, our protagonist quickly uses his power to check her lifespan and related things just to see what she's got to offer, as she's someone in need of money. Being a little hesitant talking about what she's asking, our protagonist just reassures her skepticism, as it's not something people easily believe. So to ease her doubts, he speeds up the time by 100 times with a snap of his finger, basically slowing everything down around them. As she's looking around herself, she can't believe her own eyes. The time stopped for everyone but the two of them. And as she was looking around, trying to understand what was happening, our protagonist gets straight to the point and tells her that the one who recommended him probably told her about the price of the trade. So he then asks how much is she willing to pay. This reminds her of the guy that told her about our protagonist and how he got money all of a sudden during the time he borrowed the money from her, so this has to be a real deal then. The lady then goes on to explain why she needs the money, saying that her son is a pretty good student and got a chance to study at Tianda College of Humanities and even got a chance to study abroad, but that the fees are too high and she can't afford it with the money she's got. And also that she can't get that much money even if she sold her own blood, because she doesn't want to be burdened to her child. Lee just thinks to himself that the college is just an average one as far as he knows. Mrs. Chen then, in solemn expression and a desperate voice, asks our protagonist of how much is her life worth, how much she can sell it for. Lee tells her now that that's completely up to her, that she can decide based on how much she's got left, which is 18 years. When hearing how much time she's got left, she gets taken aback as if she expected to have a different lifespan. Lee then tells her that she should really think this whole situation over, because not everything will be as good as she expects it to be, especially when it comes to a person's own lifespan. It's not a matter to be taken lightly. The lady then thinks that she's got more life than she needs, and that as long as she can see her son succeed in life, she'll be happy. Bros, this hits too hard. What is going on? I don't want mothers sacrificing their life for their children, even though that's what they basically always do. This manhwa is getting too real, bros. She simply can't allow her son to live like she did. She then says that she decided to sell some of her lifespan. Now we see our protagonist in front of a cafe saying his goodbyes to the lady that seems happy with the deal she's got. And we learn that she sold 10 years of her life to Lee, but she's walking away from our protagonist, calling her son, and then being really excited about the money she's finally got for him. A bit later, we see her meeting her son and giving him all the money, telling him that now he can graduate from that college and have a bright future. Her son is happy with the news as well and lets her know that once he graduates, he'll have a good job and will be able to buy her and treat her with whatever she wants. Hearing this makes her really sad and she starts crying, knowing that she won't live to see that day, probably, as she sold her lifespan away, leaving her with only 8 years of life. He then, being an inconsiderate brat, gets upset a bit and tells her to stop crying, as his friends might see. Oh my god, sell this boy's life right now to go buy your life back, lady. Come on. She then tells him that it's okay and that she'll leave him to his exam preparations. Upon her leaving, he calls up someone, telling them to go get the girls and a place for them to have a party and that he'll pay for everything. Now we see that our protagonist oversaw all of this and is thinking to himself how terrible this kid is and that he would teach him a lesson if it wasn't for his mother, but then he can't interfere as for him this is all just a business and nothing more. So he shouldn't get involved with his clients' lives if it doesn't directly concern his business. The next scene starts with somebody reciting a poem. Trees are 1,000 feet tall, the falling leaves settle on the roots, which basically means that the person is finally returning to his ancestral land. And we learn that the person returning to his home is Tang. We then see Tang's granddaughter saying that they are arrived home. And then we see a small group of people gathering in front of a house surrounding old Tang, and it seemed that even though Tang's lifespan was extended, he still is a dying man and he's aware of this, so he wants to do something he didn't have a chance of doing properly before because of his dedication to his work, saying goodbye to his previous life. Tang's granddaughter tells the crowd that even though she understands how they feel, they need to give old man Tang some space as his health is not the best right now. We see old Tang looking around his old house, reminding him of the old days. He finds a picture of himself and his late wife, saying that she always stayed young and he's already a rotten old man. He says that people were always saying that he wasn't good enough for her, but now it seems that they were right. He then puts his head on the picture, saying that she should wait for him because it's still not the time for him. Old man Tang then tells his son Buyan to go out and take care of everyone because he wants to stay at the old house by himself and roam around. His son agrees to it and tells him that he'll have Fang Fang bring him medicine later on. As the doors closed shut, Tang was thinking back at what happened at the hospital, thinking that it just might have been a dream. And as he was deep in his thought, our protagonist's voice came from the other side of the room, saying that he came to fulfill their contract, and then he asked if he was ready, to what the old man Tang confidently responded that he was ready the day he came back to his country. Then the process of signing the contract started. A bit later on, Fang Fang came in with the medicine for the old Tang, but he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he simply disappeared. She was shocked by this and ran back to her father and her aunt to tell them that the old man Tang just vanished. In the middle of a field, we see Tang not looking that old anymore. His codename is 04 and is a scientist scholar character that has the top learning ability of human beings and has stood at the top in relevant fields. His current ability score is 10 out of 10 because he satisfies all of the criteria of our protagonist. His job will be to find enough information for the elder to accumulate knowledge belonging to the elder, and his direction is to become the head of the biochemistry department of the longevity club. As he's walking through the field, our protagonist greets him, saying that he looks really good, thinking that those 10 years of that poor mother worked really well. And Tang tells him, as the new life awaits him, to show him the world, to what our protagonist, with a smile on his face, shakes his hand and welcomes him to the longevity club. So the new alliance gets formed with old Tang on board. The club seems to be getting a proper shape now, and it seems to be expanding into something really powerful. As the newly founded biochemistry department, we see the old Tang and our protagonist discussing the department's necessities. Lee comments that even just from looking at the list of what Tang needs for his department, it looks really expensive. Tang tells him in a rather casual way that he's not seeing the bigger picture because, as he then goes on to give a short lecture, from millions of years ago until today, the evolutionary stages of human beings have been divided into 4 particular periods. However, from more than 10,000 years ago, in addition to the continuous accumulation of knowledge, our psychological system has long stopped evolving. And so this life engineering project is the key to unlock all of the human evolution. And that's the bigger picture that can justify any cost. The benefits they'll get from this are immeasurable in terms of money. Their initial plan is to commission headhunting company to recruit elite scientists from all over the world and then establish a pharmaceutical company. He thinks that this is a long-term project and it might take years to complete, and that the experiment he has on his mind is the first stage of that long-term plan. While Tang was explaining on his plan, our protagonist was thinking that there's no problem with it, as it's completely in line with the third agenda of the Longevity Club, which is life and evolution, so he's thinking that with his help, he can help old Tang realize his ambitions. So Lee tells him that he'll support his life engineering project and that he's free to do as he wants. At that moment, we see their attention being drawn by the instructor clearing his throat and then telling our protagonist that he has some matter to discuss with him. Then, as the meeting between old Tang and Lee came to an end anyway, Lee asks Tang to list him anything he needs and that he doesn't need to worry about finances, he'll get it sorted out. He also tells him that he'll contact some headhunting company later to recruit the best talent for Tang, and also he adds that he'll soon get a gate pass. Old Man Tang thanks our protagonist and leaves the room humming, leaving the instructor and our protagonist alone. The instructor Xiao basically tells Lee that his training with Hao is almost over and that he taught him a lot already and that he can now use what he learned as a guide where the best teacher in the world is practice. So from here on out, it's up to Hao when it comes to improvement. Then with a sudden change in his expression, the instructor starts talking about a different topic. He says that through the time he spent there training Hao, that even though he's not sure what exactly are they doing, he noticed that our protagonist is definitely not an ordinary man. Lee, instantly picking up where this is going, starts thinking if the instructor would be a good fit for him. After all, he's from the real special force and so they could take him under their command. With him, Hao's growth would definitely become more fast and stable. Our protagonist has something on his mind, as he's intending on recruiting around 1,000 scientists. It seems he'll have to change some rules as well. And without saying anything directly, Lee just hands out 2 envelopes to the instructor and tells him to investigate them thoroughly. And he adds that he should count these as an interview test. The instructor, as if caught off guard, accepts it and takes the envelopes. When he opened the envelopes, he finds the name of the 2 customers of our protagonist, Si Dahi, the taxi driver, and Cheng Yuping, janitor lady that sold her time for her son's education. Reading their information, the instructor notices that it says time sold, and this utterly shocks him, but he thinks that this has to be a very powerful organization. Looking at our protagonist gazing back at him with nothing but confidence, the instructor thinks to himself that this is the real Mr. Lee, as he decided to reveal himself to him, and then with a smile on his face accepts the task and says that he should consider it already finished. Then the instructor leaves in a hurry. Our protagonist is thinking that because he'll need to recruit many more talents and elites to work for him, he'll need to draft a new set of rules which will be more stricter with a better welfare system. So he needs to draft another contract for the general staff, and this general staff needs to be distinguished from his core employees. He also thinks that after modifying the core employees, he'll no longer choose to reward time as a salary to regular employees. But if they want extra time, they'll simply have to earn it from him by some other means. Seems like the expansion of the Longevity Club requires certain key changes. Now we see in the country X at some laboratory, some scientists discussing some business with the administration. And as they are talking about some matter, one of the scientists' phone goes off. He quickly checks it and finds out that it's some headhunting company looking for employees. Before he dismisses it, as it seems it wasn't the first time he got that type of a message, he checks to see which lab it comes from and learns that it's not any lab that he's familiar with. He sees that they even have some interview questions, which kinda gets him interested. So he checks them and then loses his breath as he recognizes these questions. These are no ordinary interview questions, so he wonders who came up with them. The scientist, all excited, almost drooling over his phone, thinks to himself how someone in China actually has such a vast knowledge of immunology and virology. It's such a rare sight to be seen, if at all. He wants to go home immediately, and he wants to meet this expert that came up with such questions, and that maybe he can finally leave this place he's working for right now.